Federico, we're coming off of a very big week at App Stories where we did our first ever MacStories Starter Pack, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But first, I want to thank our two sponsors for this episode. That's Wix and Instabug. How are you doing?
Tired but happy. Is there a word for that? I'm sure the Germans have one.
They probably do. I don't know. I mean, it was quite a week last week. I've had a little time to recover over the weekend, but yeah, it was there was a lot to do. I mean, we of course wrote a lot of these stories, at least started a lot of these stories in advance before the big week.
Yeah.
But there's always so much to do, and for you and I to be publishing basically big stories every single day of the week is just a lot. I mean, I think my first three were each about 3,000 words, which is longer than a typical review or something like that. So it was a lot to kind of pull together, and it was like a lot of theoretical stuff, a lot of practical stuff, a lot of screenshots. It was a lot, but it was a lot of fun, and it went really well, and we're pretty happy about it. We thought today we'd maybe kind of hit the highlights and talk about some of the themes that we were trying to hit on with these stories.
Yeah, we basically hit the ground running, but then we had to keep running for the rest of the week.
Yes.
Like when it was, as we mentioned on the pre-show, when it was about Wednesday, it really hit me that I was like, oh, well, there's 2 more days to go. But I should say we are super happy and thankful for the response to all of our stories. And we really wanted to have this event to help people enjoy a diverse mix of useful stuff. Like it's the new year, we're all thinking about what the next year is going to look like. It's a great time to reassess your workflows, to try some new apps, try some new systems. And so it seems that our idea resonated with people, and I continue to be, like, personally speaking, I continue to be amazed by how many people tell me, like, on a daily basis now, thank you for what you do with Obsidian. I am now going down this deep rabbit hole with Obsidian, and it's great. Like, it's that feeling of I've never used any other app like this, which confirms that I think we're on the right track here in terms of, shortcuts has long been one of the pillars of MacStories in terms of coverage. And I really feel like Obsidian, we are tapping into this really vibrant community of developers and users because there's nothing else like it on Apple platforms right now. And so it's a very exciting space at the moment in terms of note-taking, markdown, text editing. So definitely expect more and more going forward. And yeah, I want to see what happens in 2022. Like, broadly speaking, we talked about this. If you haven't listened to the app trends for 2022 episode, we talked about this very thing, like note-taking, what's going to happen in 2022. We think it's going to be an interesting space to follow and observe. So you can count on us. We're definitely going to continue doing that.
Definitely going to be doing that. Yeah, and I think one of the things about Obsidian is that there's a lot of theoretical type of writing going on about it, but there aren't as many always practical examples, or at least not practical examples that explain how to use things. Whereas, you may go to GitHub and find someone set up in kind of a very technical format, but I think that we've been able to explain how to use these things a little better that helps people along with it. But let's dig in on this, because as I'm sure people will not be surprised, Federico, that your story's focused on shortcuts. I took a little bit different tact, although there is a common thread through a lot of what I wrote this week. But you had a whole bunch of shortcuts, which really, I mean, thinking back, these trace back to right after you were done with the iOS review, because I know I've talked about some of these with you for quite a while. Others are a little bit more recent, including the Obsidian Shortcut Launcher, which really, I'm not sure when you and Finn started working on that, but I know it wasn't too much before the holidays, I don't think. Maybe in November sometime.
Yeah, it was late November, I think, when I pitched the original idea to Finn. Yeah, I think it was before, end of November, early December, I think.
Yeah, so what are the shortcuts that you shared this week, Federico, and what were you trying to do with those?
So the first one I want to mention is URL Cleaner. This is a simple utility shortcut It was actually inspired by this great Mac utility by your friend and roommate co-host, friend of MacStories, friend of the show, club member, all the great qualifiers for Rob Knight. He made this great utility called Tracker Zapper. Is that the name? Tracker Zapper.
Yes.
It's a Mac menu bar app that basically, you know, when you have those links that have all the ugly parameters, like tracking parameters appended to the end of the link, basically like the UTM, like social referral stuff, like all those bits
everything
of text.
after the question mark. Everything after the question mark basically is usually junk.
Usually junk. Some websites use them for navigation in a legit way, and like sometimes it is, as a publisher, I can tell you it is valuable to have that kind of data. But at the same time, as a user, sometimes I just want to have the clean vanilla URL without all the junk at the end. So this is a shortcuts version of what Rob did. We asked for permission to use the regular expression and sort of the collection of well-known tracking parameters that Tracker Zapper had. And I put together a shortcuts version of that cleans any URL that you either pass from the share sheet that is active in Safari on the Mac, because you can do that sort of stuff with shortcuts on the Mac, or that you manually paste in if you trigger the shortcut from the home screen or from the menu bar on macOS. So there's a bunch of different ways to pass links. And at the end of the process, it's a very easy process because regular expressions done in the Cocoa engine on Apple platforms, they are super fast. So after a second, you get back the cleaned URL that is copied to your clipboard, or alternatively, you can use the shortcut as a function of other shortcuts. So if you have other shortcuts in your life that deal with links, and you want to make sure that every time those links are properly cleaned, without any tracking parameters at the end, you can use the run shortcut action, drop in the URL cleaner shortcut as a function, and that will run externally as a function of another shortcut. So you can use it manually, you can use it standalone, or you can use it as a utility, basically, and it always works.
Yeah, it's a really great shortcut. And, if you haven't run across Rob's website before, I do suggest checking it out because he's always got some great mad scientist projects going on. There's a lot of interesting things that he's worked on there. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Wix. Building a successful business online can be really challenging. Everything from creating a standout online presence and building a marketing strategy to the technical side of running a website, it's a whole lot to manage. But that's where Wix comes in. It offers a complete business solution with all of the features you need to create, manage, and grow online. You can build your website exactly the way you want to, with thousands of design features that have been created with your needs in mind. Wix has strong infrastructure in place too, providing you with reliable hosting and fast loading times. So, as a user, you'll have faster performing websites for your customers anywhere in the world. And to top it all off, you get marketing and business tools built right into your website dashboard, making it even easier for you to reach the right audiences. So head on over to Wix.com, that's Wix.com, and join the millions of people growing their businesses online today. Again, that URL is Wix.com. Our thanks to Wix for their support of the show. You also did a shortcut for the Switch, because this is grew out, I guess, almost as like a fork of your Apple frames, where you put screenshots in Apple hardware frames. This is a shortcut that puts screenshots from the Switch into a Switch frame. And it also is kind of like an extension of another shortcut that you've done that makes it a lot easier to get screenshots and videos off of a Nintendo Switch, which is kind of a cumbersome process involving QR codes and a lot of tapping around and various button presses and so forth.
Yeah. So the shortcut is called Switch Frame, And the older one that I updated with switch frame integration is called Short Switch. So I really wanted to do this week in time for Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is, by the time you're listening to this, it came out on Friday. As we are recording this, I have about 6 hours of wait left until the game unlocks at midnight for me.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
So I'm going to be playing some tonight, I think. But yes, I really wanted to get it done this week. And it's inspired by Apple Frames, same sort of techniques of Apple Frames. There's a physical console template of a Nintendo Switch, the OG Nintendo Switch in the red and blue configuration for the Joy-Cons, that is embedded within the shortcut. It's encoded in base 64. I know that you and my other friends like to make fun of this, but hey, it works. When you want to store graphical assets in a shortcut, encoding them in base 64 works. And the shortcut finds any 720p or 1080p images that you have in your photos library. Now, there's no way for me to differentiate between what is a 720p, say, screenshot of a video or what is a 720p Nintendo Switch screenshot. I wish that I could have that sort of metadata access, because in theory, the metadata of the image should say Nintendo Switch somewhere. But
you would think it would be, they have that. A lot of times they have hardware information like that.
But I cannot access that sort of filter in the find photos action in shortcuts. So when you run it, you will likely see all Nintendo Switch screenshots that you saved to photos, plus some other images that are not Nintendo Switch screenshots. But there's nothing I can do about that. You pick one or multiple ones, and each one gets framed in a physical Nintendo Switch that you can then copy to the clipboard or save back to photos, save to files, etc. So it's basically like Apple Frames. And the Short Switch update, so this is the shortcut that simplifies the process for getting screenshots and videos out of a Nintendo Switch. It basically cuts one step from the process. You only need to scan the first QR code instead of the second one too. And it makes it a bit nicer to import multiple images or videos at a time. Now, when you import them from your Nintendo Switch, you can frame those images contextually. Like, you can frame them right away. So that's a nice way to get a screenshot and frame it immediately and share it. So you can go from taking a screenshot to sharing one on Twitter on your iPhone in like 30 seconds. So that's nice, I think.
Yeah, that really is. All right. Well, I want to talk to you about Obsidian Shortcut Launcher, because to me, this is the biggest news of the week. And I think it's one of those things that's a little bit meta and takes a little while to sink in with folks, because it's kind of stacking one complex automation system on top of another to create something more powerful together. Because what it does is it takes shortcuts and turns them into commands in Obsidian. And what that means is that you can launch a shortcut from within Obsidian itself. And you might wonder, well, why is that a big deal? Because I can always open the Shortcuts app, or I can go up to my menu bar. But it does more than just invokes the shortcuts. It allows you to pass inputs from Obsidian to the shortcuts.
Exactly. Yep.
Right? And then get the results. So, and you and Finn worked on this and came up with a long list of inputs that are available that, when you think about, a lot of them are file-based that deal with things like the file name or the path and that sort of thing. Others are selection and document links. It really covers the gamut of what is possible in a text-based plain text document in Markdown, and allows you to build utilities that really leverage the power of shortcuts within a text editor, and allows you to build your own text editor. Essentially, you can build out features of your very own that are tuned exactly to the way you work and your own personal needs.
I couldn't have described it better. That's exactly what you can do. You can pass any sort of input from Obsidian to shortcuts. You can do multiple inputs at a time. We even thought about, like, okay, what if you want to pass, say, the name of the document and your text selection and the document path to shortcuts all at once? But of course, in shortcuts, you can only pass one string of text at a time. So there had to be support for a separator, like a separator character between these multiple values. And there's even support for, so by default, we use a comma as a separator, but you can also use a custom one. So you can totally customize it, make it your own. And I want to point out how the plugin, you can find it in community plugins in Obsidian. Just search for Shortcut Launcher. It's open source. You can go GitHub, explore the code, see what we're doing. It's all in the open. But it runs everywhere. So it works on the iPhone, works on the iPad, works on the Mac. But the Mac version has a little extra that makes it a bit more powerful than on the iPhone and iPad. Because on macOS Monterey, but not in iOS 15, unfortunately, Apple launched this new command line interface that lets you trigger shortcuts in the background from anywhere on the Mac, which means that the Shortcuts app does not launch. The main Shortcuts app does not come in the foreground when you trigger a shortcut with input from the command line or from AppleScript, same system. That's not possible on iOS and iPadOS. The only way to trigger shortcuts externally or remotely, basically run a shortcut from another app, is to use the URL scheme still. There's no, I expect that Apple will launch a proper run shortcut API in iOS 16 for developers to use. Because right now, using a URL scheme to open shortcuts and run a shortcut is very inefficient and very, it's very 2013 as a thing to do.
It's very slow.
Yeah, and it's very slow. So the plugin works best on the Mac, where it almost feels like the shortcut you're running is a native feature of Obsidian. It works like magic.
It's really fast. Yeah, it's super fast, and it does work completely in the background. And I've used it to do things like create template documents that have all sorts of links in them and text, and it is almost instantaneous. I mean, I absolutely love it. And that's, one of the benefits, I think, is that, the problem with the limitation of Obsidian is that when you're using Obsidian plugins, you have to work within the four corners of Obsidian itself, right? And the thing about shortcuts, being able to call out to shortcuts, is you have all sorts of system functions available to you, plus all the actions that are provided by other apps. So, for instance, I did a little demo video where I have a really simple shortcut that queries the MacStories RSS feed, gives me a bunch of articles to choose from. I pick them, and then it creates a list of markdown, a markdown list of those articles for me and pastes it into a document. That's not something you could do easily within Obsidian itself because RSS is not built in as one of the core features.
Yeah, and being able to tap into your existing automation utilities and shortcuts is one of the other advantages of this system. Like, you don't have to recreate your automations again in Obsidian. You can just invoke your existing shortcuts. And so having this bridge between Obsidian and shortcuts, I think, is really valuable, and people are responding very well to it. So I also want to say, if you have any ideas or feature requests, this is now a thing that we are developing with Finn. So let us know if you have any questions, requests. You can file issues on GitHub. Again, it's all open source, all in the open. So let us know what you want to see or what doesn't work for you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's talk a little bit about Matter, because Matter is a read later app that I've been using, and you created a shortcut called Save to Matter, which I guess the question is, why would I use this if there's already a Matter Sure extension?
And there's even a Matter shortcut action. This is so the first advantage of the Save to Matter shortcut is that it's faster because it talks directly to the Matter API. And it also supports saving multiple links at a time. So you can slot it right in other more complex shortcuts if you want to do something like a batch export, for example, to Matter from another read later app, you can do it. But the thing is, the Save to Matter shortcut is just a taste of a bigger thing that I've done, which is tinkering around with the so far still unannounced Matter API. Matter, not the home standard, but the read later tool, by the way. I just thought, everything is called Matter these days, and we need to clarify. In MacStories Weekly, I shared MatterBot, which is a more advanced shortcut that I was able to put together by discovering the endpoints of the Matter API, which exists. It's out in the open, but it's not actually been announced and there's no documentation for it. So I had to do a lot of trial and error to understand what can I actually do with the Matter API if there's no documentation for it. Obviously, I checked with the Matter folks and they were cool with me in terms of sharing my findings and sharing these shortcuts. So Matterbot came out in MacStories Weekly. It lets you do even more things for your Matter queue, such as exporting all of the highlights of an article as Markdown, or downloading an article as an MP3 file locally on your device. And that required a ton of work in terms of like, okay, this API isn't public. How can I actually access it? And I
Right.
wrote in MacStories how you can get an authorization token. It's all been detailed on MacStories, but there's even gonna be something more advanced coming for Club MacStories Plus and Premier members, which is Matterpod. This is an advanced shortcut that is best used as an automation on your devices that lets you convert your entire Matter queue to a podcast feed that you can host on your own server. This is something else that I had an idea on, like, how can is it possible that, like, could I actually put this together? It all started when I realized that the Matter API actually exposes MP3 links for the text-to-speech versions of all the articles that you save in Matter. One of the best features of Matter is the excellent text-to-speech engine that they have so that you can listen to an article instead of reading an article. But I thought that sort of audio version was like done locally on my iPhone or iPad. Turns out they are actually generating these files on their own servers, and they are exposing the links to in their API. And so, I thought about it and was like, I could actually do a shortcut here that constructs a podcast feed that is specific to your Matter account and that is continually updated so that when you mark an article as read, it's also gone from the podcast. Not vice versa, unfortunately. I cannot do the opposite thing, but this is coming this week on Club MacStories Plus and Premiere, so that's going to be cool, I think.
Yeah, that's a really wild shortcut. I'm really excited to try it out myself because I've really enjoyed listening to some articles. I do things like the other day I came back from the grocery store and I was unpacking groceries and I listened to 2 or 3 articles while I was doing that. It's just kind of a nice way to do it. And the speech engine that they're using sounds so much closer to an actual human voice than in the past that it really is good for a lot of kinds of content that you listen to. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Instabug. Building mobile apps presents some challenges. There are bugs, crashes, and performance issues that can be a nightmare for developers. But what if I told you that you could not only detect all of these issues, but also get a holistic understanding of the quality of your app from your user's point of view? Instabug is a lightweight SDK that grabs all of the insights you need to build a top quality app through comprehensive bug and crash reports, performance monitoring, and real-time user feedback, all in one SDK. With Instabug, you can continuously monitor and measure the performance of your app as perceived by your users. Empower your users to report issues and ask questions seamlessly right from inside your app. Get all of the information you need about bugs, crashes, and issues, and get them fixed in record time, all with a focus on privacy and security. And you don't have to worry about the hassle of switching to a new tool. It takes just minutes to integrate Instabug into your app, and it fits right in with your workflow. It supports Jira, Slack, Trello, GitHub, Zendesk, and over 10 other popular tools. So join over 25,000 top mobile developers around the world who use Instabug to ship high-quality apps. Go to try.instabug.com/appstories today. We'll have a link in the show notes, too, so they know you came from the show. Again, that URL, try.instabug.com/appstories. Our thanks to Instabug for their support of App Stories. All right, Federico, I want to switch over a little bit to the things that I've been writing this last week. And the first three really are, you could almost think of them as three parts of the same concept, because
yes, they
one
are.
of the things, right? Because one of the things that I sat down and tried to figure out over the holidays was, how can the apps that I use serve the work that I do, as opposed to me changing the way I work to fit within the apps. And by that, I mean, I was looking for a way to really create project-oriented workflows that fit with exactly my particular needs. And so I looked at a few things. I looked at email. I looked at links, because links are an awful big part of what we do, whether it's links that end up on the site or links shared in the club or whatever it happens to be. And then I also looked at an old friend, URL schemes, deep linking, which is kind of a hot topic, which is kind of funny because it's not like they're new, but there's a lot of reasons for that. In any event, with email, I finally decided I've been stubborn for too long, waiting for the perfect email app across all platforms. And I decided to go with MimeStream on the Mac, because the reality is most of my email work happens at my Mac, and I have a MacBook Air now. So even if I'm not sitting at my desk, I have that available to me wherever I happen to be. And I like MimeStream so much that, even though it's a beta still on the Mac, that I really wanted to give it a fair shot and make it the center of the process. And then with the rest of it, I'm still using Spark. Spark has the great sharing features that you and I use to share our email. When one of us isn't on a particular email, we can discuss it in line with the messages themselves. And I'm using Triage, which is an app that you covered almost 10 years ago. It's still around, and it allows you to quickly swipe through your messages left and right. And we talked a little bit about this last week on our episode about new apps we're using. So that's kind of the three main things I'm using. But I'm also using a service called Clean Email, which is really a power tool for batch processing lots of email very quickly. And it has some other features that are really nice, like the ability to only keep the most recent of an email from a sender, which is good for things like if you have a particular store that you like to get their offers from, but you don't want all those emails to stack up. It'll get rid of the old ones and only keep the new one, things like that. But what I used it for primarily was to sort and filter messages very quickly across a bunch of different accounts and archive and get rid of a lot of the junk that had built up. So that's a good service. On links, I actually decided to do something which I don't do lightly, which is I created a new inbox for myself.
Yes, you did.
With the Good Links app, right? So the problem with links, unlike email, email comes in from the outside and it all ends up being deposited in one place, which it can get messy and difficult in its own right. But links pose a slightly different problem, because you're the one, more often than not, finding them yourself. People send them to you, of course, but you also, find them on Twitter or on the web or wherever you happen to be. And there's no one place that all this stuff gets collected. I decided the place to put all that is in Good Links, because Good Links has really good shortcuts, AppleScript, Hook, and other support. And so I can get everything in there with a lightweight Safari extension or ShareSheet extension with some tags to give me a first level of organization. And then periodically I go through and I move those things somewhere else. Some of it, maybe it's long-term research, things I want to keep for archival purposes, and they go in DevonThink. Or maybe it's an article for MacStories Weekly, and I read it, write about it, and then I delete it. It's just kind of a place where I can go and easily filter and process links of all different kinds, whether it's a video, music, web article, whatever it happens to be, take care of them, and then put them where they belong, whether that's part of my work or just something that I want to read for pleasure reading, in which case I do use Matter for that sort of thing. So that's what I wrote about linking.
And can we get to my favorite one, please?
What's the favorite one?
The deep linking one.
The deep links. I thought you would like this story.
Yes, I do.
So URL schemes still have a lot of value, even though we have things like shortcuts. And it really particularly works well when you have a very text-based workflow like you and I do. And I realized that what the way to bring a lot of different threads together on a particular project is through deep links. So I will have notes, like I have one where I plan my week at MacStories, and I have at the top, I have a deep link to Good Task. And the Good Task link isn't just a link that opens the app, it's a link that opens a particular view of the app, which is the next 7 days in a Kanban board. So that when I'm looking at the days of the week, which I've got listed below that, I can see what I've got planned for myself and kind of rearrange things and organize them in the note as well. And then those days of the week, which are below that, they're all linked to Fantastical, and not just to open Fantastical, but to open that particular day. So I can very quickly see what's scheduled. I never have to leave Obsidian when I'm doing that. I mean, these other apps open and I can see what's going on in them. But it's a contextual thing where you don't have to be switching constantly from one app to another. And I get taken exactly to where I want to be, which is a particular day of the week or a particular view in my task manager. And so that's something that I'm trying to do with a lot of different things too. Like email is another one where, one of the problems I've always had with email is that whole hunt you go through when you are ready to do something, you think to yourself, oh, somebody sent me an email about that. And you got to go back and look for the message and hunt through everything. I'm doing my best now to get all that information out of those emails and into notes where I can reference them there. But it can still be handy to see that back and forth that happens in an email conversation, right? So for contextual reasons, I always include a link to the original conversation. And because the way deep linking works, you can then just archive that thread and you'll still be taken back to it if you click on the link. Now, MimeStream has deep linking planned for it. It's not built in yet. What they do have, though, is they have the ability to they do have the ability to generate a Gmail link, which is good enough for my purposes most of the time, where it just opens a web view of Gmail and I can see the conversation that way. But I'm really looking forward to them gaining, true deep linking where I can actually open MimeStream instead of a web browser tab.
Yeah, that was my favorite story of the bunch, because I really think it's valuable to be able to have this. Some people, like you said, some people call it contextual computing. I just think it's the right idea to be able to point to a specific resource or like area or document in another app,
right,
so that you can then do what you do, which is putting together these links that let you easily jump and reference and keep the context of your work. I think that's really valuable. Arguably, it's something that shortcuts should help you do. Like URL schemes they're not supposed to be used this way, right? That's not what they should
right.
be used for. But people still use them because there's no other great way to say, link me to this and take me back to this. Apple sort of explored this idea in Siri with like, remind me about this, like this operator that they have, but that's not enough. And sometimes you see those like Siri donations in the Shortcuts app, but not always. There should be a native way that works every time to say, I want to jump back to this message or this document in this particular application. But that doesn't exist. Therefore, you can still use URL schemes and X callback URLs that, technologies from 2011 or something, and they still work 10, 11 years later. So that was, and I think it was my favorite story because your approach, I thought, was very practical about it. Like you didn't get lost in the sort of conceptual or philosophical implementations of these things, which unfortunately a lot of people do. Like I'm fine with you calling this contextual computing, but tell me in practice, what does it do for me? That's always how I like to approach my stories, and you did as well, so that made me happy.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun to write that one. And the thing is that some apps do provide a shortcut that will take you to a particular view. I know Fantastical does that.
Yes.
But what I wanted to do was I wanted it to be in my note. And the only way to do that, I could have created a shortcut to take me to a particular view in Fantastical. But then I'd be using the shortcuts URL scheme to create a link in the document anyway. So at that point, it's kind of like, well, why have that extra step when I can use the URL scheme that Fantastical already provides? It would be nice to be able to embed shortcuts as kind of I suppose, now I'm getting ideas of what I should do. I should probably make an Obsidian plugin button that runs a shell script in the background and allows me to do it that way. That's another thing I could probably do with this. But URL schemes are awfully handy and easy to use because a lot of times developers make them very easy to just go into an item or something in their app, right-click, for instance, on the Mac, and then copy a URL. I know that's how GoodLinks does it a lot of the times. I mean, not GoodLinks, GoodTask does it. So, there's a lot of ways to do that. So there's always different ways to do it, multiple ways to do it. I found that linking has been a particularly good way to do it because so many different apps offer that already. The other two things I had this week were a review of a scanner, which I've been using this scanner that Fujitsu sent me for a couple of months, and I wasn't sure whether I would write about it or not because it's pretty clear to me that my scanning needs are close to zero now, but there have been times over the last couple of months where I really needed to scan something. And if you have a more paper-driven workflow than I do, this scanner is really good because it's fast. It takes very little space on your desk. I've used Fujitsu ScanSnap scanners in the past, and in the past, they've taken the paper out in the back and then shot it out the front onto the floor if you didn't have space in front of it. And this one does a little U-turn where it goes down into the scanner, then back up vertically again. So it takes up very little space, which I like a lot. And it's Wi-Fi enabled, which means you can put it on a side table or a bookcase or whatever it happens to be. It doesn't have to be really close to your Mac and can be somewhere where you just drop paper into it periodically and then hit scan and it shows up on either your Mac or on your iPhone or iPad because they've got an app that works with it too. So that's a really good scanner. I've been really happy with it, but nice. My needs for it are not super deep at this point. And then finally, Federico, music discovery. Music discovery is a problem with Apple Music, and people have talked about this a lot. My story doesn't rehash the problems. I wanted to really focus on the solutions because don't wait for Apple to fix it for you. You can do this stuff yourself. And so I have a bunch of tips, tricks, apps, and other things that you can use to help with music discovery if Apple isn't cutting it for you. And some of these things are things that I've written about here and there, both on the site and for the club, but I brought it all together in one place with a lot of specific ideas about how to use them. I've got things like Marvis Pro and Neptunes and Music Harbor, but not just, mentioning the apps, but how I use them to actually find new music. Last FM makes an appearance in there as well, as do some of Apple's playlists, because I think even if you're an album-oriented person, one good way to discover new music on Apple Music happens to be their curated playlists, which I think are actually, a lot of them are very good. Unlike, I think the algorithmic ones are really a mixed bag. Some of the curated ones are really good. So I have a few suggestions of my favorites there. I mean, those aren't going to be to everybody's taste, but I figured that my tastes are close enough to enough people that hopefully some people will find one or two that they haven't tried before too. So it's I decided to close out the week with something for the weekend, which is here's how to find something new to listen to for your weekend pleasure.
Nice. That's a nice way to close out the starter pack week, which is at this point, now that we have gone through the list again, I realized just how much work we got done. Good job, us. Yeah. I am patting ourselves on our backs. We've done a good job.
Yeah, don't break your arm patting us on the back. Yeah. No, but yeah, it was a lot, and it was fun to do. This is the kind of stuff that we sprinkle out throughout the year, but we had so much, especially this year, that we figured we would do it all in one place, and I think it worked out pretty well. All right, Federico, that's it for this week. You can get an extended version of this show by going to appstories.plus. It's extended, ad-free, and at a higher bit rate, and it comes out early on Sundays. So check that out if you're interested in that. Today we talked all about the background of the starter pack, but also a bunch of really nerdy stuff about shortcuts and some of the changes in 15.3. So check that out on appstories.plus. I want to thank our two sponsors for this episode as well. That's Wix and Instabug. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net and Club MacStories. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.